Welcome back to Inside the Studio. Joining us now is Deborah Fallows, also known as Deb from Jim and Deb. Deborah is an accomplished writer and linguist whose work has been featured in such publications as The Atlantic, National Geographic, Newsweek, and The New York Times. She and her husband have been researching how various communities deal with the 21st century challenges. Deborah was also present at the American Futures Conference to bring together the Redlands community with other communities for a dialogue about public policy at the local level. It's a pleasure to have her on the program for the first time. Deborah Fallows, welcome to Inside the Studio.
Thanks, Evan. It's great to be here.
Your latest article in The Atlantic is entitled Library Card. What made you interested in a story like this?
As we were traveling around the country, visiting a couple dozen towns, spending 2 or 3 weeks in each town, I started visiting the local public libraries every place we went and was completely surprised to find a number of things. One is how libraries have changed. They are a far cry from what I remember as a child or even 10 or 15 years ago, where you used to just go in, do a little reading, borrow a book, maybe do some research. There was always a school-marmish librarian who was shushing you at the front desk. Now they have become these bustling centers of the community, and you find all kinds of people doing all kinds of activities, civic and cultural activities, educational supplementary activities, and they're very engaging tech centers as well. So they really have filled in gaps of the communities, have stepped up to do things that are necessary to satisfy the wants and needs of the different places, and it's just a great find and discovery.
How would you say have libraries come full circle?
This is amazing because you might say, well, why should libraries have a maker space where you can go in and use 3D printers, or where you can experiment with science, or where you can start a business and use it as your virtual office? But actually, there's a history of this in libraries. Benjamin Franklin did his first electricity experiments at the public library in Philadelphia. Andrew Carnegie started his libraries in Pennsylvania and New York, and they had bowling alleys and billiard halls and swimming pools and bars inside the library. So when people say, oh, but this is not the work of the modern library, it actually is how libraries began and how modern libraries now see their mission to serve the people.
Why are public libraries so important to our democracy?
They are critically important to our democracy because they're open and they're free and they're for the public. They are there to serve the public and respond to the wants and needs of the community in such a democratic way. So you have everything from the homeless people going into the library to read, use the computer. Seattle is even thinking of putting in showers in the public library for people, to the other end of the socioeconomic spectrum, where you have, anybody from professors to lawyers to doctors to all of your students going into any public library at any time and doing whatever they want to do. So it really speaks of and for the by the people in a very simple way.
At the Redlands Forum that you and Jim hosted, you talked about reading readiness. What is reading readiness?
Yeah, the whole educational effort of the libraries is so critical, and where I found librarians to be most passionate is about educating kids before they get to school. That you can call it pre-literacy, you can call it pre-kindergarten, you can call it reading readiness. When I asked the director of the public library in Columbus, Ohio, well, what does reading readiness actually mean? And he said, when you see kindergartners going into school on the first day and you hand them a book and they hold it upside down, there is no reading readiness there. So the Columbus, Ohio School Public Library sees it, like many libraries, as part of their mission to get kids ready to go to school and be literate with at least the use of a book, the look of a book, the habits of listening to stories and paying attention, and focus on the whole literary world.
You talked at that same forum about the engineering elementary school in Greenville, South Carolina. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and the whole public school system that we saw around the country was also kind of aligned with what public libraries are doing, that you have schools popping up in every town that really speak to the place of the town where they are. In Greenville, South Carolina, there are a lot of engineers from BMW, from Michelin, from General Electric, and the school system was suffering a lot in that town, and they decided that they'd make each of the schools have a magnet focus. In the really epicenter of the urban downtown, where there was a lot of challenge in the public schools, they decided to make a school of engineering and opened the A.J. Whittington Elementary School of Engineering. From pre-K through 5, you've got these kids with a curriculum based exclusively, but including all of the usual arts and humanities around engineering. And you have the people from the community, from General Electric primarily, coming in to teach the classes at, this very elementary age of the principles of engineering, and getting these little bitty kids accustomed to the new technological world and prepare them to move on into jobs in places like GE and Michelin as well.
And then before we go, I want you to just tell this very moving story that you also shared at the forum about this man who was using the public library, and how did they help him?
Yes. So in the public libraries, if you ask the librarians, what's the most popular thing people do on the computers in the libraries, they'll always say they're doing job searches. So at this most basic level, what a job search means is that you have people coming in needing help with how to look for a job. And they told me the story of one man, probably in about his 20s, who went into the library needing this help, asked a librarian if she could help him identify some likely jobs that he might apply for and do the application. So she did that, and they found some jobs, and she drew up the application, and she said, here it is on the screen. I'll give you about 20 minutes to fill in the application, and when I come back, we'll check it together and we'll file it. So she went away, and he filled in the application, and when she came back, she saw what he had interpreted as filling in the application to be that he had taken a marking pen and on the screen in front of him had written all of the information with his pen. So that is the very basic end of the spectrum of the kind of help people need from librarians and from patient librarians on how to use the computer and what to do to help their lives get better. That's part of the democratic definition of public libraries.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program, and next time you come on, we'll have to check in and see what the progress is that's been made in the libraries across this country.
Thanks, Evan. It's been a real pleasure to be here.